Hi, bookworms. So I'm gonna do another quick book review, and this is a quick book review, and this is a book called Lee versus Ali: The Fight of the Century. And there's been a little mock-up of Bruce Lee versus Muhammad Ali in a ring. It's called The Dragon versus the Greatest: The Fight of the Century. Well, unfortunately, this never actually occurred and never actually happened. So it's one of those kind of fantasy books, and really, this came about because I read this book, Who Would Win in a Fight Between Muhammad Ali and Bruce Lee, which is actually a book of sports questions, but that was one of the questions. And obviously, they've realized that Muhammad Ali and Bruce Lee are such bankable names that if you put them either of them in the title, you're going to sell more copies. So that's basically what they did. They put that on the cover, and I'm sure that sells more copies. In fact, I know a book that was called Bruce Lee and Me, and that's probably just sold a guy about his own martial arts journey, and that sold loads of copies just because it's got Bruce Lee in the title. So, but this one is called Lee versus Ali: The Fight of the Century, written by Bruce Thomas. If I'm honest, it's less of a book and more of a kind of booklet, but it's got lots of pictures in it in black and white, and some of them are actually quite good. Some of them are, and really what is doing is, discussing the whole idea of who would win in a fight between Bruce Lee and Muhammad Ali, and it goes into details and tries to answer it in a bit more of a serious thing. On the back, he's written, in his movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino's depiction of Bruce Lee as an arrogant loudmouth was lazy, disrespectful, and wrong. It had no relevance to the actual storyline and was included purely to shock and generate publicity. Like Bruce's daughter Shannon, his followers worldwide were equally dismayed by it. Based on his experience writing about martial arts and boxing, the author describes what really would have happened if Bruce Lee had met Muhammad Ali and shines a light on the true relationship between these two great masters. And this is written by a guy called Bruce Thomas. The fact is, nobody can tell you what would really have happened if they met together. But the interesting thing is, Bruce Lee was aware of Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali was aware of Bruce Lee. They lived in the same time period, but unfortunately, Bruce Lee died in 1973, 2 weeks before his magnum opus, his Enter the Dragon, was going to be released. Never saw stardom. Muhammad Ali only died, I think, about, was it maybe 10 years ago, and he lived a good full life and was able to enjoy the accolades of fame, although he did have Parkinson's at the end. So they had completely different lives, never actually met. There's an interesting story. He goes, that was while he was making Enter the Dragon, Bruce Lee's co-star John Saxon asked him why he watched so much film footage of Muhammad Ali. Bruce responded with a fat smile, because someday I'm going to fight him. So the idea is that this maybe makes you come to a kind of decision about who would have won in an actual confrontation. But of course, it's all about possibly this, possibly that. No one would ever know. What this book does and answers in a more serious question. For example, it gives you the tail of the tape. Now, Ali was a heavyweight. Lee was a super lightweight. Ali was 6'3". Bruce Lee was 5'7". Ali's reach was 78 inches. Bruce Lee's reach was 70 inches in terms of his hand reach. Weight wise, Ali was 210 pounds. Bruce Lee was 137 pounds. Ali, if they'd met when Bruce Lee was 32, Ali was 26. No, actually, that doesn't make sense. I think what they've done here is they've tried to get them at their peak. So I'm not sure how they've worked that out, because when Bruce Lee died, he was 32. And in 1974, Ali fought George Foreman at the age of 32. So that would have made him about 30 or something when Bruce Lee died, I think. Something like that. Anyway, I mean, this book is more of a booklet, but he does go through some. I like the cover, incidentally. That's a kind of fantasy type cover. But what what they've done is just gone over some of the, you know, some of the computations of what might have happened. Um, Bruce Lee actually didn't fight by street rules. He created his own art, and he was all about who would win in a confrontation. What he did in, without any holds barred, what he did in the movies was completely different from what he actually believed in terms of street fighting. In fact, what he did in the movies was completely just for the movies, and he said that himself. It was all because what you do in a real street fight, it's not very nice looking. It's very short, and it doesn't look good in a movie. So Bruce Lee was the complete opposite of that in the movies, but he did understand the whole concept of real street fighting. He was a bit of a street fighter in his youth. He also taught and coached a lot of karate fighters who did fight in competitions, and a lot of people said things about him and said that he was just too fast. There are some people that would come out and say other things. Muhammad Ali, on the other hand, was a heavyweight boxer in a ring with gloves and certain rules. And there's no doubt about it that if Bruce Lee had gloves on and fought by boxing rules, he would have been absolutely decimated. And a few sort of martial arts versus boxer confrontations have happened. Ali himself got into a ring with a guy called Antonio Inoki, and that's been written about in this. And basically, after Ali hit the guy a couple of times, this guy, Antonio Inoki, was a Japanese wrestler, literally got on the floor and just crawled around and hit Ali's legs and actually damaged his legs quite badly. Ali had to have clots removed from his legs. So it wasn't a very good idea. Obviously, Ali was doing it at the time because he needed the money. I think they were being offered $5 million at the time, which is pretty crazy money. In the end, I think he got $2 million. There are other boxers that have tried to do the whole thing. There's obviously the UFC thing, and the UFC was a no holds barred type of competition. And it turned out that the people who knew grappling and wrestling just absolutely decimated boxers and strikers because they just took them to the floor and choked them out. And boxers just aren't developed for that. They just don't deal with that. Now it's a different situation because all of the people that are going into UFC are strikers and grapplers, so they have an all round sort of experience with different combative arts. The funny thing is, Bruce Lee's often seen as the kind of father of mixed martial arts or the grandfather. And if you see in the Enter the Dragon, he literally has a kind of UFC type setup. So that was the first time that was ever seen in a kind of visualized movie setting. Anyway, apart from that, other people like Conor McGregor fought Floyd Mayweather, but Floyd Mayweather made sure that Conor McGregor had gloves on and it was under boxing rules. And Conor McGregor did quite well. He lost, but he did pretty damn well, I have to admit. And I think if it had been reversed and Conor McGregor had been able to do his whole, MMA thing, and I think Floyd Mayweather would have had a very, very different, it would have been a very different story. I think he would have been kind of wasted. But having said that, really, I suppose this book is all about the kind of idea that a lot of males have, a lot of men have, of who would win in an actual street fight. So I think this book is a kind of extension of that whole idea of who would actually win. And I think really it's anybody's guess really. I think you can come up with all sorts of different scenarios. But like I said, it's quite a nice wee booklet. And I kind of came to this because I thought this was what this book was about. This is a more of a sports book. I covered this in an earlier book review, but in the chapter they basically come to the same conclusions that we'll never really know. So yeah, I would say that martial arts are great. They're the great development for anybody. Sports are great to develop characters, especially men's characters. I think it's really important for boys and men to do something like that. But don't get involved in street fights. Street fights, completely different, completely unpredictable, and really just not a good idea. and don't benefit anybody. But unfortunately, sometimes we get caught into situations where we can't get out, and that's when having some martial arts knowledge, I think, is useful. But anyway, that's Lee versus Ali, The Fight of the Century by Bruce Thomas. You know, it's one of these Amazon type printed books, but it's kind of interesting to, if you've ever thought about the idea of who would win in a fight between Muhammad Ali and Bruce Lee. And like I said, there's a whole, that was the title they used on this book. So I hope you enjoyed that. Maybe give you something to think about. I love the cover of it, like I said. And that's me for until the next book review. Thank you.